In the dead of night, when most people are safely tucked in their beds, there are those who stand guard against the shadows. Security guards are the silent protectors of our world, watching over empty buildings, valuable assets, and classified information while the rest of us sleep peacefully. They are trained to notice what others miss, to spot the unusual in the ordinary, and to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. But what happens when a routine security check uncovers something that shouldn't exist? What happens when a simple electronic glitch leads to a discovery that threatens to shake the very foundation of trust within an organization? What happens when the person you're supposed to protect might be the very person you need to investigate? This is the true story of Marcus Thompson, a dedicated night security guard whose keen eye for detail and unwavering commitment to his duty led him down a rabbit hole of deception, betrayal, and corporate espionage. It's a story that began with a flickering light and a strange beeping sound, but ended with revelations that would change everything he thought he knew about the people he worked with every day. In a world where technology has made surveillance easier than ever before, sometimes the most dangerous threats come from those who know exactly how to hide in plain sight. Sometimes the enemy isn't trying to break in from the outside. They're already on the inside, using their position of trust to steal secrets and sell them to the highest bidder. This is a story about courage, integrity, and the price of doing what's right, even when it means facing danger and putting your own career on the line. It's about a man who refused to look the other way when he stumbled upon evidence of something that could destroy lives and careers. Most importantly, it's about the power of persistence and the importance of trusting your instincts, even when everyone around you thinks you're imagining things. Get ready to dive into a world of midnight investigations, hidden surveillance devices, and shocking discoveries that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. Marcus Thompson had been working the night shift at Meridian Industries for almost 3 years, and he thought he knew every sound, every shadow, and every quirk of the sprawling corporate complex. The 42-year-old former police officer had taken the security job after a back injury forced him into early retirement from the force, but he approached his new role with the same dedication and attention to detail that had made him a respected cop for 15 years. The Meridian Industries building was a gleaming monument to modern business success, housing offices for over 2,000 employees across 12 floors. During the day, it buzzed with activity as marketing executives, software developers, financial analysts, and administrative staff worked to keep the company at the forefront of the technology consulting industry. But at night, when the last employee had gone home and the cleaning crew had finished their work, the building transformed into something entirely different, a vast, echoing space where every sound seemed amplified and every shadow could potentially hide a threat. Marcus took pride in his work. While some security guards might have been content to sit behind their desk and watch monitors all night, he believed in conducting thorough physical patrols. Every 2 hours, he would walk the entire building, checking doors, windows, and any areas where someone might attempt to gain unauthorized access. He carried a heavy-duty flashlight, a two-way radio, and a detailed logbook where he recorded the time and location of each checkpoint during his rounds. On this particular Tuesday night in late October, everything started normally. Marcus had arrived for his shift at 11 o'clock, relieving Dave Martinez, the evening security guard who worked until 11 each night. Dave had reported nothing unusual during his 8-hour shift, just the typical stream of employees leaving the building between 5 and 7 o'clock, followed by the cleaning crew that worked from 8 to 10:30 each evening. The first few hours of Marcus's shift passed without incident. He completed his midnight patrol, checking all the standard locations and finding nothing out of the ordinary. The building's sophisticated electronic security system showed all green lights on his control panel, indicating that every door and window sensor was functioning properly and that no unauthorized access had been detected. It was during his 2 o'clock patrol that Marcus first noticed something strange. As he walked down the 8th floor corridor, which housed the offices of several senior executives, including the chief financial officer, he heard a faint but persistent beeping sound. It was rhythmic and electronic, like the sound a smoke detector makes when its battery is low. But it seemed to be coming from inside one of the offices rather than from a ceiling-mounted detector. Marcus stopped in the hallway and listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. It was definitely coming from the direction of the executive offices, but the beeping was so faint that he had to strain to hear it. He tried several office doors, but they were all locked as expected. The sound seemed to be strongest near the office of Camilla Richardson, the chief financial officer, but he couldn't be certain without getting inside. Camilla Richardson was one of the most respected executives at Meridian Industries. She had joined the company 5 years earlier, bringing with her an impressive background in corporate finance and a reputation for turning around struggling divisions. Under her leadership, the company's financial performance had improved dramatically, and she was widely credited with securing several major contracts that had propelled Meridian to new heights of success. Marcus had interacted with Camilla on several occasions during his time at the company, usually during the evening hours when she would stay late to work on important projects. She was always professional and courteous with him, often stopping to chat briefly about his family or to thank him for his dedication to keeping the building secure. She struck him as the kind of person who genuinely cared about the people around her, regardless of their position in the company hierarchy. Standing in the hallway outside her office, Marcus faced a dilemma. The beeping sound could indicate a legitimate problem, perhaps a malfunctioning piece of electronic equipment or a security device that needed attention. But entering an executive's office during the night shift was something that required careful consideration and proper documentation. He didn't want to overstep his boundaries, but he also couldn't ignore a potential security issue. After thinking for several minutes, Marcus decided to contact his supervisor, Jim Harrison, who worked the day shift as head of security for the building. Jim was an experienced security professional who had worked in corporate security for over 20 years, and Marcus trusted his judgment on matters like this. Using his cell phone, Marcus called Jim's emergency number, knowing that his supervisor would want to be informed of any unusual situation, even if it meant waking him up in the middle of the night. Jim answered on the third ring, his voice groggy but alert. Marcus explained the situation as clearly as possible, describing the beeping sound and its apparent location near Camilla's office. Jim listened carefully and then asked several questions about the nature of the sound, its frequency, and whether Marcus had noticed anything else unusual during his patrol. After a brief discussion, Jim gave Marcus permission to investigate further. However, he stressed the importance of documenting everything thoroughly and suggested that Marcus use his cell phone to record video of his investigation. If there turned out to be a legitimate security concern, they would need detailed documentation of how it was discovered and what steps were taken to address it. Armed with his supervisor's authorization, Marcus returned to the 8th floor with a heightened sense of purpose. The beeping sound was still there, perhaps even slightly louder than before. He used his master key to unlock Camilla's office door, making sure to note the exact time of entry in his logbook. As he pushed open the door and stepped inside, the beeping sound became noticeably stronger. Camilla's office was spacious and elegantly furnished, with a large mahogany desk, comfortable seating area, and walls lined with bookshelves containing both professional references and personal mementos. Marcus had been inside the office before, but only briefly, and always with Camilla present. Now, alone in the dark space, with only his flashlight for illumination, he felt somewhat uncomfortable about intruding on her private workspace. The beeping sound was definitely coming from somewhere inside the office, but pinpointing its exact location proved challenging. Marcus methodically searched the room, checking behind furniture, inside desk drawers, and along the walls where electronic devices might be hidden. The sound seemed to be strongest near the bookshelf that covered the wall behind Camilla's desk, but he couldn't identify a specific source. As Marcus examined the bookshelf more closely, running his flashlight beam along each shelf and between the books, he noticed something odd. One section of books appeared to be slightly different from the others. The spines were aligned perfectly, almost as if they had been glued together to create a single unit. When he gently pressed against this section, it moved slightly, suggesting that it might not be real books at all. Curiosity getting the better of him, Marcus carefully removed what he now realized was a fake book panel. Behind it was a small electronic device, about the size of a smartphone, with a tiny blinking red light that corresponded perfectly with the beeping sound he had been hearing. The device appeared to be some sort of recording or transmission equipment with a small antenna and what looked like a memory card slot. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he stared at the device. In his years as a police officer, he had encountered similar equipment used for surveillance and espionage activities. This was definitely not standard office equipment, and its hidden location suggested that it had been placed there without authorization. The implications were staggering. Someone was conducting unauthorized surveillance in the chief financial officer's office, potentially capturing sensitive corporate information or personal conversations. Fighting the urge to immediately remove the device, Marcus remembered his supervisor's instructions about documentation. He carefully photographed the device from multiple angles, making sure to capture its exact location behind the fake book panel. He also recorded a brief video explaining what he had discovered and noting the time and circumstances of the discovery. The device itself appeared to be professionally manufactured rather than some kind of homemade contraption. It had the sleek, sophisticated appearance of commercial-grade surveillance equipment, suggesting that whoever had placed it there had access to expensive and specialized technology. The blinking light and persistent beeping indicated that it was actively operating, possibly recording conversations or transmitting data to an external location. As Marcus continued to examine the device without disturbing it, he noticed several troubling details. The equipment appeared to have been in place for some time, based on the slight dust accumulation around its edges. The fake book panel that concealed it was expertly crafted, matching the other books on the shelf so perfectly that it would be nearly impossible to detect during a casual examination. Most concerning of all, the device's location behind Camilla's desk meant that it would be perfectly positioned to record any conversations taking place in the office. The discovery raised numerous questions that Marcus found deeply troubling. Who had placed the device in Camilla's office? And how had they gained access to install it without being detected? What type of information was being recorded or transmitted, and who was receiving it? Was Camilla aware of the surveillance, or was she being monitored without her knowledge? Most importantly, how long had this been going on, and what sensitive corporate information might have already been compromised? Marcus realized that he was facing a situation far more complex and serious than a simple security breach. This appeared to be a case of corporate espionage, involving sophisticated surveillance equipment and careful planning by someone with intimate knowledge of the building's layout and security procedures. The discovery had the potential to rock Meridian Industries to its core, depending on what information had been captured and who was responsible for the surveillance. Standing alone in Camilla's office at 2:30 in the morning, with the illegal surveillance device beeping softly behind its hiding place, Marcus understood that his next decisions would be crucial. He needed to determine the best way to handle this discovery while ensuring that any evidence was preserved and that the investigation could proceed without alerting whoever was responsible for the surveillance. The simple night patrol that had started with a strange beeping sound had suddenly become something much more significant and potentially dangerous. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders as he carefully replaced the fake book panel, leaving the surveillance device exactly as he had found it. He knew that his discovery was just the beginning of what promised to be a complex and challenging investigation. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the simple routine of checking doors and monitoring security cameras. The midnight security breach had been discovered, and now the real work would begin. Marcus spent the remainder of his shift in a state of heightened alertness, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. He completed his regular patrols on schedule, but his attention was divided between his normal security duties and the implications of what he had discovered in Camilla Richardson's office. The surveillance device continued its soft, rhythmic beeping, a constant reminder of the serious situation that had been uncovered. By the time Dave Martinez arrived to begin the morning shift at 7 o'clock, Marcus had made several important decisions about how to proceed. He had decided not to mention the discovery to Dave, recognizing that this information needed to be carefully controlled until a proper investigation could be launched. Instead, he simply conducted the normal shift change procedures, briefing Dave on routine matters and signing out without revealing the extraordinary events of the night. Marcus drove home through the early morning traffic, but instead of going directly to bed as he normally would after a night shift, he sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee and carefully reviewed the photographs and videos he had taken of the surveillance device. In the clear light of day, the evidence looked even more disturbing than it had in the darkened office. The device was clearly sophisticated and expensive, suggesting that this was not the work of an amateur or someone acting on impulse. At 9 o'clock, Marcus called Jim Harrison to report his discovery in detail. Jim listened with increasing concern as Marcus described finding the surveillance device and provided a thorough account of how he had documented everything while leaving the device undisturbed. Jim immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation and asked Marcus to come to the office later that morning to review the evidence together and determine the best way to proceed. When Marcus arrived at Meridian Industries at 11 o'clock, he found Jim waiting for him in the security office with a grim expression. Jim had already contacted the company's senior management and legal department to inform them of the potential security breach, though he had been careful not to reveal specific details until he could review Marcus's evidence firsthand. Together, Marcus and Jim examined the photographs and video footage on Marcus's phone. Jim's 20 years of security experience made him immediately recognize the surveillance device as professional-grade equipment, likely costing several $1,000s and requiring technical expertise to install and operate. The sophisticated nature of the device suggested that this was not a random act of vandalism or theft, but rather a carefully planned operation with serious implications for corporate security. Jim's first concern was determining whether other surveillance devices might be hidden throughout the building. If someone had gone to the trouble and expense of placing one sophisticated device in Camilla's office, it was possible that additional equipment had been installed in other locations. Jim decided to conduct a comprehensive electronic sweep of the building, using specialized detection equipment to search for unauthorized surveillance devices. The electronic sweep was a complex and time-consuming process that required checking every office, conference room, and common area for signs of unauthorized surveillance equipment. Jim brought in a specialized security consultant who had experience in corporate counter-surveillance, and together they spent the entire afternoon methodically examining the building, floor by floor. The results of the sweep were both reassuring and puzzling. No additional surveillance devices were discovered anywhere else in the building, suggesting that whoever was responsible for the equipment in Camilla's office had targeted her specifically, rather than conducting broad surveillance of the entire company. This raised new questions about the motivation behind the surveillance and why Camilla had been singled out as a target. While the electronic sweep was being conducted, Marcus and Jim worked together to review the building's security records and access logs for the past several months. They were looking for any unusual patterns or activities that might provide clues about when and how the surveillance device had been installed. This process involved examining hundreds of records, including employee access card data, visitor logs, maintenance requests, and after-hours work authorizations. The review of security records revealed several interesting patterns that warranted further investigation. During the past 6 months, there had been an unusual number of maintenance and cleaning requests for the 8th floor, particularly for the executive office area where Camilla's office was located. Many of these requests had been submitted by Samantha Hayes, Camilla's executive assistant, who had been with the company for 3 years and had access to Camilla's office for legitimate business purposes. Marcus and Jim also discovered that several employees had been granted after-hours access to the 8th floor during recent months for various projects and deadlines. Most of these access requests appeared to be legitimate and had been properly approved by management, but the pattern suggested that there had been numerous opportunities for someone to install surveillance equipment without being detected. One particular entry in the access logs caught their attention. 3 weeks earlier, there had been a maintenance request for electrical work in Camilla's office, supposedly to address problems with flickering lights and power outlets. The work had been authorized by Samantha Hayes and performed by an outside electrical contractor during evening hours when most employees had gone home. The timing and nature of this maintenance work made it a prime candidate for when the surveillance device might have been installed. Jim immediately began investigating the electrical contractor who had performed the work. The company, Precision Electric Services, appeared to be legitimate and had performed work for Meridian Industries on several previous occasions. However, when Jim called their office to inquire about the specific work performed in Camilla's office, he was told that they had no record of any electrical work being done at Meridian Industries during that time period. This revelation was deeply troubling, as it suggested that the maintenance request had been fraudulent and that someone had used fake credentials to gain access to Camilla's office. The sophistication of the deception implied that whoever was responsible had inside knowledge of the company's maintenance procedures and had been able to forge or manipulate the necessary paperwork to authorize the work. As the investigation continued, Jim decided that it was time to involve law enforcement. The discovery of unauthorized surveillance equipment, combined with evidence of fraudulent maintenance requests and possible identity theft, constituted serious criminal activity that required professional investigation. He contacted Detective Sarah Chen at the local police department, who specialized in corporate crime and cybersecurity cases. Detective Chen arrived at Meridian Industries late in the afternoon and spent several hours reviewing the evidence that Marcus and Jim had collected. She was particularly interested in the sophisticated nature of the surveillance device and the elaborate deception that had apparently been used to install it. Based on her experience with similar cases, she believed that this was likely the work of professional corporate spies rather than disgruntled employees or amateur criminals. The detective explained that corporate espionage had become increasingly common in recent years, as companies sought to gain competitive advantages by stealing trade secrets, financial information, and strategic plans from their rivals. The fact that Camilla Richardson was the chief financial officer made her a particularly attractive target, as she would have access to sensitive financial data, merger and acquisition plans, and other information that could be extremely valuable to competitors. Detective Chen recommended that the surveillance device be left in place for the time being, as removing it might alert whoever was responsible and cause them to destroy evidence or flee before they could be identified and arrested. Instead, she suggested setting up counter-surveillance to monitor who might be receiving data from the device and to identify the individuals responsible for the operation. This decision created a complex ethical and practical dilemma for Marcus and Jim. Leaving the surveillance device in place meant that Camilla would continue to be monitored without her knowledge, potentially exposing sensitive corporate information and personal conversations. However, Removing the device prematurely might prevent them from identifying the perpetrators and could result in other surveillance equipment being activated or new devices being installed elsewhere. After extensive discussion with Detective Chen and Meridian Industries' legal counsel, the decision was made to leave the device in place while implementing additional security measures to protect the company's interests. These measures included temporarily relocating sensitive meetings and discussions away from Camilla's office, limiting access to confidential information that might be discussed in her presence, and establishing a timeline for how long the device would be allowed to remain active. Detective Chen also began the process of obtaining legal authorization for more invasive investigative techniques, including surveillance of employees who might be involved in the espionage operation and analysis of the electronic signals being transmitted by the surveillance device. This process would take several days and would require careful coordination with federal authorities, as corporate espionage often involved interstate or international criminal organizations. As the day drew to a close, Marcus found himself at the center of an investigation far more complex and significant than anything he had encountered during his years as a police officer. What had started as a routine security patrol had uncovered evidence of a sophisticated criminal operation that threatened the security and competitiveness of Meridian Industries. The weight of responsibility was considerable, as Marcus realized that his actions and decisions in the coming days could have far-reaching implications for the company, its employees, and potentially for national economic security if foreign competitors or hostile governments were involved in the espionage operation. The simple discovery of a beeping sound had evolved into a high-stakes investigation that would test his skills, judgment, and courage. Standing in the security office as evening approached, Marcus looked out at the building where thousands of employees worked each day, unaware that their company was under attack by sophisticated criminals. He thought about Camilla Richardson, who would soon arrive for another evening of work in her compromised office, unknowing that her every word and action was being monitored and recorded by unseen enemies. The investigation was just beginning, and Marcus knew that the most challenging and dangerous parts lay ahead. Whoever was responsible for the surveillance operation had demonstrated sophisticated planning, technical expertise, and ruthless determination. They would not give up easily when they realized that their operation had been discovered, and they might be willing to take extreme measures to protect their investment and avoid prosecution. As Marcus prepared to return home and try to get some rest before his next shift, he realized that his life had changed permanently. He was no longer just a security guard performing routine patrols and checking doors. He had become a key player in a high-stakes game of corporate espionage, where the wrong move could have devastating consequences for everyone involved. The midnight security breach had been discovered, but the real battle was just beginning. The following morning brought unexpected developments that would dramatically expand the scope of the investigation. Detective Chen called Jim Harrison at 8 o'clock with urgent news from the police department's cybercrime unit. Their preliminary analysis of the electronic signals being transmitted by the surveillance device had revealed something alarming. The data was being sent to a sophisticated relay system that appeared to span multiple locations and possibly even multiple countries. Marcus arrived at the office to find a flurry of activity that was carefully disguised to avoid attracting attention from the general employee population. FBI agents had joined the investigation, recognizing that the sophisticated nature of the espionage operation and its potential international connections elevated it to a matter of national security. The agents worked quietly in a conference room that had been designated as a secure command center, coordinating with local law enforcement and corporate security personnel. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, who led the FBI's Corporate Espionage Task Force, briefed Marcus and Jim on the expanded investigation. She explained that similar surveillance operations had been discovered at several other major corporations across the country during the past year, suggesting that they were dealing with a well-organized criminal network rather than an isolated incident. The targeting of chief financial officers and other senior executives appeared to be a consistent pattern in these cases. The FBI's involvement brought sophisticated investigative resources to bear on the case, including advanced electronic surveillance capabilities and access to international intelligence networks. However, it also meant that the investigation would need to be conducted with extreme care to avoid alerting the criminal organization and potentially compromising other ongoing investigations. Agent Martinez explained that the surveillance device in Camilla's office was likely just one component of a much larger intelligence-gathering operation. The criminals behind these operations typically planted multiple surveillance devices across different companies and industries, creating a comprehensive picture of economic and strategic intelligence that could be sold to foreign competitors or hostile governments. The revelation that this might be part of an international espionage network added a new layer of complexity and danger to the situation. If foreign intelligence agencies were involved, the criminals would have significant resources and would be highly motivated to protect their operation through whatever means necessary. This could include attempts to intimidate or harm individuals who threaten to expose their activities. As the investigation progressed, the focus began to shift toward identifying how the surveillance device had been installed and who within Meridian Industries might be involved in the operation. The fraudulent maintenance request that had provided access to Camilla's office became a crucial piece of evidence, as it suggested that someone with inside knowledge of company procedures had facilitated the installation. Detective Chen and Agent Martinez worked together to analyze the paperwork associated with the maintenance request, looking for clues about how the authorization had been obtained and who might have been involved in creating the fraudulent documentation. They discovered that the request had been submitted through the company's online maintenance portal using legitimate login credentials belonging to Samantha Hayes, Camilla's executive assistant. This discovery placed Samantha Hayes at the center of the investigation, though it was unclear whether she was a willing participant in the espionage operation or whether her credentials had been stolen and used without her knowledge. The investigators needed to determine the truth without alerting her to the ongoing investigation, as she could potentially destroy evidence or warn other members of the criminal network if she was indeed involved. Marcus was asked to conduct discreet surveillance of Samantha Hayes during his regular security duties, observing her behavior and documenting any unusual activities or contacts. This assignment made him somewhat uncomfortable, as he had always maintained friendly relationships with the employees he was responsible for protecting. The idea of secretly investigating someone he had chatted with casually for years felt like a betrayal of trust, even though he understood the necessity of the task. Samantha Hayes was a 34-year-old single mother who had worked at Meridian Industries for 3 years. She had started as a temporary administrative assistant and had quickly impressed supervisors with her organizational skills and attention to detail. When the position of executive assistant to the chief financial officer became available, she had been the natural choice for the promotion. From Marcus's perspective, Samantha had always seemed like a dedicated and trustworthy employee. She often worked long hours to support Camilla's demanding schedule, and she had always been professional and courteous in her interactions with security personnel. She was known throughout the company for her reliability and discretion, qualities that were essential for someone with access to sensitive financial information. However, as Marcus began to observe Samantha more carefully, he noticed some behaviors that seemed potentially suspicious in light of the ongoing investigation. She appeared to be more nervous than usual, frequently checking her phone and looking around as if she was worried about being watched. She also seemed to be taking more breaks than normal, often leaving her desk to make phone calls or step outside for brief periods. One particularly concerning observation occurred on Thursday afternoon when Marcus noticed Samantha having an intense conversation with someone on her cell phone in the parking lot outside the building. She was speaking quietly and appeared agitated, frequently looking around to ensure that she wasn't being overheard. The conversation lasted nearly 15 minutes, which was unusual for someone who typically kept personal calls brief during working hours. Marcus discreetly photographed Samantha during this conversation and recorded the time and duration of the call. He also noted that she appeared to be writing down information during the conversation, though he was too far away to see what she was writing. When she returned to the building, she seemed more composed but still appeared to be under considerable stress. The investigation team decided to obtain legal authorization to monitor Samantha's communications, including her phone calls and email messages. This process required careful legal justification and oversight, as monitoring an employee's personal communications was a serious step that could have significant legal implications if not handled properly. While waiting for the legal authorization to be approved, Marcus and the other investigators continued to gather information through other means. They reviewed Samantha's employment records, looking for any unusual patterns or connections that might indicate involvement in criminal activity. They also analyzed her access card records to determine when and how often she had entered Camilla's office during the past several months. The access card records revealed that Samantha had been in Camilla's office much more frequently than would be expected for routine administrative duties. During the past 3 months, she had accessed the office an average of 4 times per day, including several occasions when she had entered the office during evening hours when Camilla was not present. While some of these entries could be explained by legitimate business needs, the frequency and timing suggested that she might have had other reasons for being in the office so often. On Friday evening, the investigation took a dramatic turn when electronic surveillance detected unusual activity from the surveillance device in Camilla's office. The device had been transmitting data continuously since its discovery, but the signal pattern suddenly changed, suggesting that someone was attempting to download a large volume of stored information. Agent Martinez immediately activated the FBI's technical response team, which had been standing by to trace the electronic signals if any unusual activity was detected. Using sophisticated signal analysis equipment, the team was able to track the transmission to a location approximately 10 miles from Meridian Industries, in a small office building that housed several technology companies. The FBI quickly obtained a search warrant for the location where the signals were being received and assembled a tactical team to conduct a raid. Marcus was invited to observe the operation from a secure location, as his discovery of the original surveillance device had been crucial to uncovering the broader criminal network. The raid was conducted at 11 o'clock on Friday night, with agents simultaneously entering multiple offices in the building where the surveillance signals had been traced. What they discovered exceeded their expectations. A sophisticated intelligence gathering operation that included banks of computers, advanced communication equipment, and evidence of surveillance operations targeting dozens of major corporations across multiple industries. The operation was being run by a team of 5 individuals, including both American citizens and foreign nationals. They had been collecting intelligence from surveillance devices planted in companies throughout the region for at least 18 months, gathering information about merger and acquisition plans, financial performance data, strategic business plans, and other highly sensitive corporate information. The evidence seized during the raid included detailed dossiers on hundreds of corporate executives, including Camilla Richardson and many other senior officials at Meridian Industries and competing companies. The criminals had been building comprehensive profiles of their targets, including personal information that could be used for blackmail or coercion if their surveillance operations were discovered. Among the evidence seized was a laptop computer that contained communications between the surveillance team and their handlers, who appeared to be based in Eastern Europe. The communications revealed that the operation was being funded and directed by a foreign intelligence service, with the ultimate goal of gathering economic intelligence that could provide competitive advantages to foreign corporations and governments.